This week on You Should Be Watching, if you love Twin Peaks, what else should you watch? We've got that answer for you. Also, we talk about what we thought about The Outsider and what are the best Stephen King adaptations. All that and more on This Week in You Should Be Watching. Hey guys, and welcome to a new episode of You Should Be Watching. This is episode 4, and I'm Chastity, and with me today, Ryan and Greg are both back. Hey guys.
Hello.
We are back.
Good to have you both back on the show, and we are also joined by a guest, our good friend here at GameSpot Universe, Mr. Ryan Schubert. Hey Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
There are two Ryans, so I'm going to be calling him Schubert the rest of the episode so that you know who I'm talking to. If I just say Ryan, I'm probably talking to Peterson.
You could never have too many Ryans on a
There's
podcast.
so many Ryans.
Yeah.
It'll
This
be very
way,
confusing for
I
audio.
will be the only one who gets confused.
I'll just change it every time. I'll throw a Shubes, I'll throw a Schubert, and I'll throw Ryan S. It'll be very confusing.
okay.
I'm sorry. Anyway, Ryan Schubert, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Ryan Schubert.
Yes, you are.
Schubert, Shubes,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it's going to be. I do all of our YouTube strategy and work on the curation of all of our YouTube channels for GameSpot and GameSpot Universe. And
But where have
occasionally...
people seen you on GameSpot Universe?
Well, they've seen me do some breakdowns with Greg for Castle Rock, Twilight Zone, Twin Peaks.
That's
A
right.
few years ago.
Very true.
Yeah.
All right, we have this ultimate question for all of our guests. Get ready for it. What are 3 shows or movies that would explain your personality? So you're going to list them one by one
This is a
and
tough one.
explain why.
This is a tough one. I mean, I had maybe 24 hours warning on
Yes.
this, and it's truly difficult. But I think I was able to get down to 3 things that work for me. So they're all a little esoteric, but the first thing is a movie from I think the 90s called Della Morte dell'Amore, which was released in the United States as Cemetery Man. It's
Okay.
an Italian horror film, somewhat firmly rooted in that genre. It's a zombie movie. It's about a caretaker of a cemetery, an unnaturally good-looking caretaker, played by Rupert Everett. And
I love Rupert Everett.
yeah, he's great. And his way too hotness is balanced out by Francois Haji Lazaro, who was who played the Cyclops character in City of Lost Children.
Okay.
And basically, the story is how the problem at the cemetery is that the recently buried dead come back to life, and it's kind of a day-to-day problem.
Oh.
And
This sounds rad.
the
It does.
local Italian government is kind of corrupt, and they don't give him the funding he needs to get enough bullets to kill the zombies. It's very tongue-in-cheek, but mixed with good horror effects.
All right.
Also inspired by a lot of surrealist art, and it's like super trippy but super funny, and it's got kind of everything that I like in a truly entertaining movie with funny characters, scary stuff, plenty to laugh at, but also a little bit of social commentary.
This is very you.
Yeah, and then it drifts off into total weirdness towards the end of the movie.
Love
And it's
it.
it's
Awesome.
fantastic. It's charming if you can find it.
That's the
Yeah,
issue.
where
do
Where
we
find something like
will we
that?
find it? Okay, so what's number 2?
And just a couple other things on that. It's directed by a special effects director who worked mainly with Dario Argento, and then later with Terry Gilliam on some of his films of the last probably 2 decades. Later than that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So not necessarily the best period of Terry Gilliam, but yeah. Anyway, if you can find it, man, a great film.
Okay, number 2.
So number 2, for me, it's actually not. I went to a show. I want to have one show in here, and it's not exactly one show, but the various TV shows by Canadian director Ken Finkelman. So the sort of big one to get to the United States was The Newsroom, not the HBO show or whatever Showtime. And then that became More Tears. And then down the road, there were other series like Good Dog and a few others. The thing that ties them all together is that he plays, Ken Finkelman writes, directs, stars in the show. And he plays a television news producer who is kind of a scumbag. But he's also got an intellectual side and a thoughtful side, and the show is always sort of like wrestling between his cynical view of the world and then also like doing the right thing. And Finkelman himself is a huge film nerd and a big Fellini fan, so sometimes the show just like drifts off into homage.
Nice.
I think the entire second half of the More Tears series is the character leaves the news business or actually doesn't leave it, but sort of starts directing a film at the same time, and like reality and the movie start to blend together. What's kind of cool about the series, or any of them, is that he was kind of like first to do these shows that really became popular. So there's a lot that The Office owes to More Tears and The Newsroom, and then also Curb Your Enthusiasm as well.
Nice.
In fact, the Good Dog series, and this is like maybe even 10 years ago at this point, actually opens with the character trying to get on a flight to go to Los Angeles to meet with Larry David because he thinks he's been stolen from.
That's great.
So it's got a lot of that meta to it.
Nice.
And so all of those things, the creativity, there's loads of like really good social commentary about media and things like that.
Okay.
And the humor, all of that stuff comes together.
Got it.
If you watched our Castle Rock breakdowns, we've actually pulled a bunch of clips from that show before.
Oh, really?
Yes, we have.
All right.
Guilty.
And number 3.
Okay, number 3, I kind of just felt like I had to include this. There's so many films that I love, but to have something that's actually recent, The Act of Killing, I think, was maybe the best film I've seen in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And it's a tremendous movie. It's a documentary about the people who committed war crimes in the Philippines a couple generations ago, who are still alive, who never were tried for war crimes, in some ways are still cultural heroes there because, you know, they won, so to speak. And they're, you know, now they're old. And what's sort of fascinating about it is that the director was able to get access by the premise of the movie was getting together with them and getting them to reenact their war crimes in a dramatic fashion. And these guys, when they were younger, were heavily influenced by American cinema and like gangster movies. They loved Clint Eastwood, and they were really into this idea of like dramatizing the things that they're still very proud of, but it really lays bare the horrible things that they did.
Yeah.
In some cases, the degree to which they might have remorse, but it's really strange. And what's bizarre about it is that it's so absurd. It's so bizarre. I wasn't even sure that it was real the first time I saw it. I was maybe one of a handful of people that were laughing during the movie.
I was like some kind of Spinal Tap thing for a second before it kicks in. You're like, wait.
I felt like I was allowed to laugh because the director, I saw it at the film festival. The director wasn't there, but there was like this pre-recorded statement, or the pre-recorded statement was in the theater. Somebody read a statement from him that said, "This is weird, it's dark, but it's also funny. Like, it's okay to laugh at it." And what that relates to me is that there's a lot of horrible things that happen, but sometimes viewing them through a lens of absurdity allows us to release some of that angst about those things, but also gives us the ability to look at them with a little bit more open eyes. So,
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, the next segment is called What's on Your TV, and we talk about what we've been watching recently, but also we could talk about movies too. It's completely open. So Ryan, what have you been watching?
Obviously, I've been watching some Westworld season 3. You got to watch Westworld. I'm happy with what's happening so far.
And
But
we've got those breakdowns.
yeah, we have those breakdowns coming. Watch it on GameSpot Universe. But also, I've been really trying to get away from any of the dramas, any of the normal shows, and watch a little bit more food stuff. And on Netflix, Ugly Delicious season 2 just dropped a couple weeks ago.
I gotta watch that. Season 1 is so good.
Yeah, season 1's really good, and
Made me so hungry.
yeah, it does. It makes you. That's the one bad thing is that you're sitting there just like watching. You're like, oh my god, that looks so good.
I got to make something now. Same
Yeah.
thing for
Yeah.
Favreau's show too. Chefs. Is it
Chef Show.
Chef
yeah.
Show.
That's another great one.
Yes, I love that one.
So yeah, I know that like recently Netflix, some of the reality TV shows are really like hot, and I tend to stay away from all the reality, all the
Watch The
romance.
Circle.
I've heard good things,
it.
Greg. I've heard good things, but I like the conversations that David Chang has with a handful of people from different mixes, different backgrounds. They try. It's really well done production wise, but he's going to all parts of the world, having difficult conversations, what food means to everybody, the authenticity behind it. And you'll stumble upon people that you don't normally think would be interested in food and stuff like that. So they went to India, they went to the Middle East, they did a whole episode on steak, and then throughout the whole midst of this, he also had his first child too. So it's kind of cool to see a lot of these chefs open up about what having their child meant to them and how it changed their lifestyle and how they see the world. And food ultimately just brings everyone together. So it's a very like familial thing, and it's just really well done. Only 4 episodes this season,
it's
so
really short.
Yeah, I just powered through it. I mean, they're not like half-hour episodes; a little bit longer, an hour, sometimes over, but. Highly recommended. It's a lot of fun.
Was there a highlight episode, or was it that steak episode you're mentioning?
Steak was really good. I actually like the Indian one was really good. I think it's called Don't Call It Curry, and it just shows kind of the cuisine of India and the spices and kind of why that kind of spread across the whole world and what every different region of the world brings to the whole thing of food, right? And what we and the influences from all over the place. So I found that one to be a lot of fun, really cool. And they go at the very end. I actually had an Indian wedding myself, so
Nice.
I kind of know kind of the cuisine. And they go to an Indian wedding in India. They basically crashed the wedding, and it looked like amazing. If you've ever been to an Indian,
fun anyway.
yeah, if you've ever been to an Indian wedding, it's like it's the most fun wedding ever. And just the cuisine that they had is very like community. So many people are there, and
It's a lengthy wedding too, right?
very
It's like
yeah,
all day.
yeah, all
It
day,
goes-
multiple days
pretty late,
across.
yeah.
So yeah, I can't say enough good things about that. But I also love Chef Show as well. I think it's cool to get like different filmmakers and artists and kind of get them in the kitchen and see what they can come up with.
God.
Greg, what are you watching?
Right at this moment, of course, Drag Race, to be honest with you.
Yeah, talk about Drag Race.
I can't.
We don't talk about
there's
Drag Race enough on GSU.
Spoilers, but there's a person on that show that will not be named, like Voldemort. It's really awkward. That's all I'll say about that.
Oh, boy.
It's making the show very. It's just the cringe values up a lot because of a certain character who's going to be there for
Oh, boy.
quite some time, even though they've already been disqualified. So yeah.
Wow.
But with that said, other than that, when it comes to narrative format, I'm watching Devs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me too.
What's going on? Explain
Yes.
it to me. I know
Explain it to you.
We had
We've got
the creator
videos
here,
that explain
and
it.
Yeah,
We do.
Check out those breakdowns, and we
Yeah.
also had Alex Garland here.
Yep,
There's a
shout
video
out.
on GameSpot Universe that you guys can watch where he explains it because I had questions. But yeah, it's a great show. I'm enjoying it. I think I've got screeners, so I'm about 5 or 6 episodes in, and at the time that this episode's going up, there will be 4 episodes, I believe. So yeah, just keep watching.
Okay.
It gets better and better. And Nick Offerman's great in it and playing off
Yes.
type. And you're watching it, right?
Yeah. I think it's incredible. I think anything that he does, like the world that he creates, Alex Garland, he just does it really well.
I knew the
done.
production design would be flat
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
amazing because of Garland's name alone.
Totally.
But then just watching it going, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, it really
Over
makes
and
you think.
over.
What is the premise of the show exactly?
So the premise is that we have her name is Lily Chan. She's played by Sonoya Mizuno. She was in Maniac. She was also in Ex Machina. And so she plays someone who works at this Silicon Valley tech company, and she thinks that the company is behind the murder of her boyfriend. That is what she believes, and she's investigating it. And so they're very powerful. Nick Offerman's a CEO, and is he hiding it? Is he not hiding it? Is he involved? Is he a nice guy? That's pretty much the premise of the show. And what are they up to?
And it feels like it takes
quantum
place.
Computing company as well.
And you're not really sure exactly what
They're building
their intentions
something.
are, but they're like Google type, but even bigger probably. And it's kind of like set in the near future. It feels like.
Yeah, their tech is pretty. I mean, like it's not too far off though.
I wouldn't be surprised if we walked in some of these tech companies and
it's
saw
not
some of
too
this
far
stuff
off, but
happening.
it's about quantum computing and the mystery behind what this devs division is up to.
Right.
And it involves I don't know. I shouldn't get into.
Watch it, Ryan.
I won't say
Schubert,
what they do.
watch it.
Just check it out. I think you would like it. All right, Schubert, what are you watching?
Okay, I'm watching a lot of things, but and I'm only an episode in, but shout out to Better Call Saul. That was the best show of 2 years ago.
I think I talked about this last week.
And
You did.
everyone should absolutely watch
We're going to
it.
be bringing this up, I think, every week.
It's absolutely great. And it transcends Breaking Bad, even though it's finally starting to catch up to that timeline.
Wow. Do you agree?
I think I do, because I think that the degree of difficulty to make this as high quality and entertaining of a show is even harder after going through Breaking Bad and dealing with kind of Walter White becoming like this kingpin. This is like a lot of like legalities like in the courtroom, and it makes it so interesting. And they write themselves into a hole, and then they get themselves out of it, and you're just like, wow, this is incredibly done
I feel
and
like
thought
a
out.
TV hipster because I'm like, Frasier did it first. Sorry, they already did this.
Again with the Frasier.
Oh, they did.
Yes.
No, that's okay. Sorry.
But it's
No, that's
also
fine.
it's also great because it's a beautiful character study of really everyone who's in it. Like it's not just Jimmy or the Bob Odenkirk character. It's his brother. It's his sort of partner in crime, the other lawyer. It's Mike, who's in Breaking Bad. It's not just about that. The concept and the story of Breaking Bad are barely even present for the first 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And it's it's heartwarming at times. It's heart-wrenching at times.
Heartbreaking, yeah.
And it kind of has all of those things in a show that is, kind of bereft of a significant amount of like action or violence or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I say the degree of difficulty because we kind of already know where it ends, where the end point is, and yet we're still watching and wondering how it's going to all happen and how you're watching the downfall of a character. We're going to probably lose some characters soon, right? But it's basically that's why it's so hard that they've still kept our attention. And you're right, they build up and they build each one of these characters out, like Kim, his romantic interest, and you just kind of see her struggling with Jimmy McGill and then Saul Goodman,
She's maybe the best character in the show.
I agree with you. Yeah, she's awesome.
And it also has that element where I think generally when we want to talk about the show, don't bring up, but it is sort of book-ended-ish with stuff that happens after Breaking Bad.
All the flash forwards, yeah.
Yeah, the sort of the black and white flash
that we've only
forwards.
seen parts of, yeah.
And the show has been through the season sort of slowly pushing that narrative a little bit more and more, but very subtly. I wonder if it's going to sort of conclude in that time period or not, or whether I'm still curious how this is going to go.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about.
Greg's like, no spoilers.
spoilers, yeah.
We didn't spoil, did we? I don't think we spoiled.
You didn't.
I don't think
we're
so.
trying to speak as generic as
I'm just
possible
Yes.
from
with
someone
Better Call
who's
Of
Saul.
course.
watched only Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, guys, careful here.
Yes.
No, it's fine.
No, I hear
I
you.
didn't.
I hear you.
I thought it was fine. I also have not watched any
Oh,
Better
good.
Call Saul, but I want to talk about The Good Place as an entire packaged series.
Yes.
And also, I want to start with that series finale. Are you all caught up?
I'm sorry, I'm not. But you guys can
watch
go
it.
ahead, spoil ahead.
No,
I think
no,
it's
no,
worthy.
no
I don't
spoilers.
want to.
We will speak in like general terms and just how we felt about it and how we felt about it as a series
All good.
altogether. because this is one of the best written, like, high concept comedies I've ever seen. And it all came together so beautifully. I loved the finale so much. And I cried. I honestly cried.
I think everybody did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when that aired, and you expect it from things like Game of Thrones that there's going to be like a social media light up, but on Facebook I just saw all these people, all these friends that were just kind of like gushing about the conclusion of that series, and it was a good moment. It wasn't as big as something like Game of Thrones, but it was just the feeling of the conclusion of something that, as a show, is an amazing journey, and it's an unexpected one. It starts off seeming really kind of silly, and you have to stick with it for a few episodes to kind of get past what seems like a really, really gimmicky concept at the beginning, and then then the characters develop, and
it becomes something so special. And that season 1 twist, just really, you're like, oh, okay, I thought I knew what this show was, but now we're on a different level, and they just kept upping the game every season.
Absolutely. And you just don't see the sort of what I would say like the sort of intellectual level of in a 30-minute comedy show.
Right. Yeah. It's brilliant. I love it. And I just love how they sent off every single character in a beautiful way. Yeah, it was wonderful. All right, the next segment is called You Should Be Watching, which is also the name of the show, but today's topic is, if you enjoyed Twin Peaks, what else should you be watching? We're here to answer that question. Ryan Schubert, you first.
Okay.
What should people watch if they like Twin Peaks? Because you two have covered a lot of Twin Peaks for us at GameSpot Universe, so they're going to want to know your answers.
I think there's just one show. I'm pretty sure people have seen it, but
Yeah.
Okay. What I think that Twin Peaks has is a lot of quirkiness mixed in with existential dread, and weird surrealist kind of interpretations of reality and how we interact with each other. So
bits of horror,
shows that also have that. I think, okay, sorry. Greg is gonna, I think, take that one.
Say it at the same time.
Say it 1, 2, 3, go for it.
Say it at the same time.
We're thinking the same thing. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Lost.
Okay, cool.
That was amazing.
All right.
Good job, guys.
And also, what is a good parallel between those two is the sort of swell and the viewership and the cultural zeitgeist around it. That if you take Twin Peaks as the initial run, the sort of massive disappointment that came with its conclusion, and the impact it had on Lynch's ability to do other things. Lost had a sort of similar way of going out, even though I was sort of in a minority that didn't mind how it went out. But
I'm still crushed.
That's
that
the division amongst people who liked and enjoyed Lost, and then didn't enjoy the ending, or did enjoy the ending. So yeah,
I'm a weirdo that way. But the journey was so great in Lost. At every turn, the what is going on is a question that you're always waiting for the answer. And with each season, there's just more curveballs that make it more convoluted, but to me, like delightfully convoluted in a way that's something that Twin Peaks does.
Yeah, for every one answer, you get 5 more questions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And to add on to that, again, the showrunners and creators would take Lost, and Damon Lindelof would be able to use that to make Leftovers, which feels like a complete version. Like he was able to take, okay, you didn't like the ending to, all right, Lost. All right, don't worry. We'll take care of that with Leftovers. And I think that's one of the greatest shows we've seen in the past, like I think 50 years or even beyond that. Maybe go down as one of the greatest shows ever.
So you would recommend Leftovers? Is there
absolutely.
anything else you recommend?
No, Lost. And if you're really into Twin Peaks, if you like Twin Peaks, start with Lost and then move on to Leftovers. That's my opinion on it.
Now, I do want to give a shout out to The Prisoner, which is a British show from the 1960s starring Patrick McGoohan. Actually, it was sort of like Patrick McGoohan's brainchild. It's I want to say, 17-part, just like The Return was, series. The story is about a James Bond type British agent who resigns from his post and is promptly kidnapped. And when he wakes up, he's in a place called The Village, which is this little like seaside town with people who don't have names, they just have numbers. And the sort of banner of it is that the people in control of the village, which is sort of like a benevolent seeming prison, are just trying to get out of him why he resigned. And that's sort of the setup. And as the story goes on, it becomes just more and more bizarre of like, where actually is this? What actually is happening? Just like Lost, just like Twin Peaks, you have so many questions whenever there's something that gets revealed. Like, one answer spawns 5 more questions. Like you said, it's that kind of a show, and it's, bizarre quirkiness sort of fits that thing of like everybody's like way too cheerful until you like scratch beneath the surface, and then there's like dread underneath, and there's criticisms of basically like every form of government, every kind of just about everything is in there. And for a show that's so old at this point, it's great. You can find it. I think it's on Amazon at this point. They've remastered it.
Nice.
And it's
Does it hold up pretty
fantastic. I think it's great. We've been watching it actually pretty recently, and it still holds up.
Awesome.
You invited me over for a prisoner watch party.
Yeah, no, I've got a friend who's been sort of curating screenings of it, and if you decide to watch the show, I also highly recommend that you look on YouTube. There was a guy who got the show onto Bay Area PBS, KTEH, and he had his own airing order. So some of the behind the scenes stuff here is that, or the fan stuff is that people don't agree on what order you're supposed to watch the episodes in. So there's a question of like whether the original.
Are they standalones?
They're basically standalones. There's some that tie together, and like the finale is like 2 episodes clearly.
Yeah.
But there's debate over how they occur chronologically, or conceptually as they like build on the idea. And so Scott Appel showed it in the United States, and he had his own order of airing the series, which moved a bunch of things around. And if you go on like Wikipedia, like his list is there. The AV Club has their version of it too, which is basically Scott Appel's airing order, but with a couple of other adjustments. Everybody has to justify why they changed the order of things. But what's great is that Scott Appel would introduce and conclude every episode when it was on KTEH, and you can find his sort of like breakdowns, basically. It's the kind of stuff that we do on YouTube. And nice. I would recommend that there's a before and an after for each episode, and it's like if you can watch those too, it's great. And he is so cheesy. It's like kind of cringy. Like he gets dressed up. It's like cosplay. He's got a set with like lava lamps and other stuff. It's too much.
Trekkies, we've done this for years, decades actually too. There are some old VHS tapes where I've seen breakdowns where people are in their basement and garage and they got on their whole entire fit on, and they're like, okay, in this episode of TNG,
So this is great though, because
this is
like
Sorry.
This is with
Should we set up a basement with lava lamps and do TNG?
I can do that.
All right, cool.
There we go.
That's my dream.
This is great though, because this is like the one level of production above that. So he's like got the set sort of like we do, or it's like there's some props and stuff around, and he'll do like dramatic turns to the camera kind of stuff. It's too much.
All right, Ryan Peterson, you've been quiet.
I was gonna say, guys, I've been really quiet over here, just laughing randomly.
He's just absorbing.
Why have you been so quiet?
I have to be honest with you guys. I've not watched Twin Peaks.
Boo this man. Boo.
I've watched like random things of David Lynch, but some people just can't get into it.
That's fine.
That's
fine.
I'm not as
totally
evolved as all you guys. You guys get it. I just don't get it.
But knowing the genre and knowing what it involves, what would you recommend?
I would like to talk about Noah Hawley and some of the stuff that he's brought to the table in recent
He
years.
seems very influenced by Twin
Yeah, he
Peaks.
seems very influenced by David Lynch and some of his work. Fargo, obviously, he adapted for TV, and it has a little bit of that. But more recently, Legion, which I know that we're all fans of.
Yes.
And Legion was obviously, a superhero story, or not really a superhero, a comic book story. He could be good and bad at times. But it had all that. It had visually out of this world, something that we've never seen before. There's horror, extremes of horror, absurdness, comedy, and at the whole time you're like, what am I watching? What exactly is going on? This is a crazy interpretation of a fight, of conflict. It had so much in there, and it was captivating. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen in terms of the comic book genre. So that's probably one of the things that I would suggest if I watch Twin Peaks. I would suggest watch Legion, because it's one of those shows that like if you're into the comic book thing and you're into David Lynch's work, like you're gonna like this. I think.
So Greg, you've watched both. So what would you say? You would recommend Legion as well?
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, they do dance numbers to choreograph fight sequences. They're like, I just have a dance number.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just the idea that came up from someone on set, like, let's just have them dance it out.
I love
in
it.
the astral plane.
And the changing of aspect ratios, black and white, and just random stuff. And then there are parts where it's like someone's like burned into a wall, or like caught into a wall, and it's like completely body horror, and you're just like, what the hell's going on? And then there are like really sweet, genuine, touching moments as well in here. I thought it was just really well done. Believe just 3 seasons, right? Is it 4 seasons?
Right?
We did all the breakdowns. I don't know. It's a blur.
But
it was all like
time's running too fast.
It's
been gone for so long.
What I'm saying is, it didn't overstay its welcome. Like, it did what it did, and it kind of lived in its own like thing. Like, here's this weird, uncanny thing that they're making up here about a kind of fringe comic book character that not a lot of people were completely. It's not mainstream, but I thought they did an excellent job with it.
We may never see anything like that again.
Yeah,
unless
I
Noah
agree.
Hawley. He did say he was talking to Kevin Feige a while back.
Do more.
don't
Let
know.
Holly do a lot more.
I don't know. I think he's going to be holding on to Star Trek, which I am thrilled if that's the case.
Yes.
But we'll
I
see.
want to see what he would do with a Star Trek. I think I would really enjoy that.
I think they're planning on a movie, but we don't know. Again, it's all the Viacom CBS stuff too, so we don't know. He's going to do something with the movies, apparently.
Okay.
But Schubert, you also watched Legion.
I did.
Does it pass your test?
I have to confess I have not finished Legion.
That's okay.
Which I feel bad about.
That's
but
awesome.
Season three's the
I
best.
agree 100%. Like what Legion has that is similar to Twin Peaks is actually pretty profound. Like there is a team of ill-matched people that have a like common foe, which is a difficult to define enemy, and that is a representative of like a darkness in society. It's like that is also what Twin Peaks is. They're very similar in that way. And I remember it was this time, I think 3 years ago, when I think it was season 2 of Legion might have been happening, or maybe season 1, I can't remember. But this was maybe 2 months, 3 months away from Twin Peaks, The Return, releasing. And we were all talking about Legion as this very David Lynch-esque experience. And with a young, fresh perspective on those themes, and wondering like, wow, I wonder if David Lynch still has it. Like, he's going to be releasing his Twin Peaks show, which is at this point, ancient series. What are the chances it's going to be as fresh and exciting as Legion is? Is it going to just be like a tired reboot, like so many reboots actually are? And it surpassed our expectations by a long shot. But that period of time, that 3 months, to me was a little bit nerve-wracking. I love David Lynch. I love everything he does, but like looking at Legion, I was like, man, I don't know if Lynch can get there.
Remember, they didn't release anything
Yeah.
during the trailers for Twin Peaks: The Return. They didn't release a single thing. It was like
It was
tiny
it was
segments.
art. Yeah.
And we were like, okay, I don't know where they're going with this. But again, I thought they were going to be in the high school. They're going to make them do a whole, like every episode's going to have a joke in there for something.
Right.
To, general audience. Not at all.
No.
They gave
It
this
doesn't hold your
all
hand.
to Lynch.
No, it
It
does
just
not.
throws you right in. It's very unforgiving, but I love that about it.
Yes.
I have a question for all you Twin Peaks fans. If you could have David Lynch make a superhero, like turn it into a movie,
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange. That's your answer?
I wanna see
Chastity,
David
Doctor
Lynch's
Strange? What
Doctor
about you guys?
Strange.
Wow. That would be pretty
Sorry,
cool.
this is
I don't-
off the
I
cuff.
I want to see David Lynch's Doctor Strange.
That'd be ridiculous.
Ant-Man.
Ant-Man.
Oh,
Okay.
I would watch that.
I just think of like the Elephant Man. Like, what would he do? Ant-Man. And then a mix of like Cronenberg's The Fly would be in there a little bit. He would literally turn into an ant at some point.
Wow. Yeah.
But I honestly want to see David Lynch do a James Bond movie. That would make more sense.
Oh my
Give it to him, you
gosh.
cowards. Just let him just go crazy and end it out on a dream sequence.
That would be crazy.
So we've been talking about David Lynch. I want to recommend an actual David Lynch movie. If you're a David Lynch fan, then this doesn't apply to you. But if you've only watched Twin Peaks and you want more David Lynch, I think you have to go with Mulholland Drive.
Yes.
Would you agree? Yeah.
Yes.
It's just like the piece de resistance, the creme de la creme. That is the movie I always come back to. I can sometimes come back to the others, but repeatedly, and whenever I recommend David Lynch or I show someone David Lynch in terms of Twin Peaks, they're like, "Oh, what movies should I watch?" I'm like, just go into Mulholland Drive first.
Yeah. Mulholland Drive is the one. It's great.
It's the one.
I think-
Naomi
He's
Watts
gonna
is
do
incredible.
anything
I think
else. I think
it's
he's got
good
his-
to maybe watch Lost Highway ahead of that.
Of
but,
course.
I mean, Mulholland Drive, it sort of has the same history, right? It was almost a television show. There's, some people want to make the case that they're the same universe.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks.
I believe it's the same universe.
I mean, in the scene in Club Silencio, there are
Two
two
women.
Twin
Actresses,
Peaks
yeah.
characters. People like to think in the audience.
They look like them. They look like them.
Sure do. In fact, I think the actress, the Ronette Pulaski actress, is one of those
Yes,
two.
she
So
is.
it is like legitimately
Same universe.
there
So good.
for sure. And I guess you also have the Robert Forster connection. Was he in the movie? I can't remember if he's in the movie. I have a copy of the pilot. Like I eventually
Don't
acquired a copy
remember,
of the
yeah.
Mulholland Drive pilot, and there's some scenes in there with Robert Forster as a cop.
I don't think he's in the movie.
Yeah.
don't
I want to say no,
Yeah,
but now I have
I'm
Robert
not
Forster in my
recalling.
head from
There's-
everything.
Yeah,
now.
from everything exactly.
God.
But there's a couple of scenes with him in the pilot. One of my favorite things about that, having seen the pilot, is that I remember when Mulholland Drive came out, and a lot of people came out of the theater with sort of the same reaction that they had to Lost Highway, which was, "What the heck was that?"
What was that?
And what did I just watch? It's a mess. And at
But
the
then
time,
you can't stop thinking about it
Oh,
for
yeah.
the next few days.
but at the time, it was a lot of people just chalked it up to, this was supposed to be a television show, and clearly what's missing is the rest of the plot. There's individual scenes that don't make sense on their own that would make sense if the characters, spent more time in the series. And it's like, yeah, if you don't have any idea what you're talking about, that makes sense. Like you could sort of reduce your initial reaction to Mulholland Drive pretty easily that way. But here's the thing, is that those scenes that seem sort of disconnected, like the scene in the Winkies, right?
Yeah.
Like the guy who like describes his dream, and then there's somebody behind the restaurant. Like there are scenes like that with characters who don't appear to have any impact on the main plot that a lot of people sort of conjectured would appear later in the series. Those scenes were shot for the movie. They're not from the TV show. Like after ABC canceled the show, Lynch got the rights back to the show and decided to make a movie, and he shot more scenes for it. And, some of them, which seem separated, were actually original material for the movie.
yeah, Mulholland Drive. You should watch it. So The Outsider just wrapped up recently, and that was a Stephen King adaptation. So that brings us to our next question, which is, what is the best Stephen King adaptation? So I present that to you guys, but first, really quickly, overall thoughts, no spoilers, about The Outsider.
I think it's fantastic.
Ooh.
I think it's, in its way, one of the best Stephen King adaptations I've ever seen. Like, there's mood, there's tone, there's the way that Stephen King writes characters that I think the show handles really well. Like, there's sort of like the no, to be fair, I'm only 6 episodes in, but there's the cop who's sort of like the bad guy, or becoming the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that character is so classically the kind of bully town jerk that is in so many Stephen King stories. Like, he's a really kind of terrible, kind of scary person, but is also quite the coward. Like, and emotionally childish, and like, in a way, like sympathetic for being kind of a sad human. And a lot of the time in Stephen King adaptations, that character, which appears in so many of them, is often turned into more of a stronger menace than that character is portrayed as in The Outsider. And I think that's one of the nails that the show hits, like, right on the head.
Greg, thoughts on The Outsider?
Tacking on to this guy right here, same thing. I think really it is the best adaptation, at least TV adaptation, I'd say. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen anything like this. No. HBO, they're going to continue to do this with Stephen King properties, I think, in the future, because this is a good example of what they can do. I loved every second of it, to be honest with you.
Ryan?
Now, I didn't read the book. I didn't read The Outsider of the book, but I thought this is really well done. I think Richard Price, the guy who adapted it, the writer, that adapted for TV, did an awesome job with it. I have finished it though, so I don't want to spoil anything. I think it started off stronger than it ended. And I sometimes I just
really?
feel
With Stephen King? Sorry.
I just feel like I liked. I think it loses me on some of the supernatural things when it gets a little bit hokey for me, in my opinion.
This is what the showrunners were worried about. I think, because I've read the book, and the monster in the book feels a lot more like Pennywise than you see on the show. The interactions are a little different compared to what you see actually in the show, because, again, I think the showrunners were worried about the idea of, looking at the monster, can you see the zipper on the back kind of vibe. They didn't want that, so they kept it in the background as long as they could.
Yeah, I just feel like sometimes some of the rules kind of changed as you got farther into the season, and you're like, oh, now this happened. Now this is what can go on. Now this, and then, but it started off really as like a drama, like a murder mystery, like what's going on with some supernatural. So I still think it's really good. I think that we could see more of the Outsider series, like make it like a more than just a limited series, and like tell different stories of kind of Cynthia Erivo's character, like maybe doing more things. And did I just spoil it for you guys? I don't want to spoil it.
That's okay. We're good.
No, that's good. Okay.
All right, so now let's talk about Stephen King adaptations as a whole. I want to present first The Shining, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
It's just, I can never unsee that movie. It just sticks with me. It's my ultimate favorite horror movie
Give me the bat.
of all time.
Give me the bat.
Yeah,
I'm not going to hurt you.
It's so visually striking, and they're like the performances, like, especially Jack Nicholson. Yeah, and just it's haunting. Yeah, I can specifically see scenes in my head right now that I can't unsee.
It never leaves you.
It never leaves
after you see
yeah.
it.
It's chilling, and it's exactly what I want out of a horror film. And I'm not even going to talk about Dr. Sleep right now, but let's continue.
I love Dr. Sleep.
I liked it too, but I
fan
didn't
of
like it
Dr.
as a
Sleep.
sequel to The Shining.
I think this movie, over time, people are going to come on board to this film like no other. When it comes to Stephen King adaptations, people are going to be standing for this.
As an adaptation, yes, it's very good. It just kind of takes me out of it. If you watch them back to back, you're like, what? Where's the? No, I don't know.
I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to love this movie after a few years.
To be fair, I think reading the book was a similar experience.
That's what I've heard.
I haven't seen Dr. Sleep yet, but what sort of kept me out of it was I wasn't a very big fan of the book.
You didn't like the book. I know. We were talking about it. You were reading the book, like, I like it this week, and then all of a sudden you just stopped talking about the book.
I think Lucy was saying the same thing. and she's just like, it kind of reads not like something that was written right after The Shining. Kind of reads like a fanfic.
Yeah.
I think that's relatively fair.
All right.
Schubert, what do you recommend?
So that's hard.
Best Stephen King adaptation.
So I don't want to claim that what I'm about to say is
We could go
is
on
fairly
Favorites. How
is
about
fairly the best.
favorites?
Actually, I'm not even sure if it's my favorite, but I think that the word I would attach to it is maybe emblematic of at least a period. I think that after the 1990s, starting in the early 90s with Misery and moving forward, you'd see that, King's stories for film and television really hit mainstream, and also a more kind of adult audience. You could have dramas, not just kind of like monster movies.
Dolores
So
Claiborne.
what I kind of like to point at is before that, before he like kind of graduated into that more adult realm. Before that, in the 1970s, 1980s, he was a pulp horror writer, and the movies that were based on his books were pulp horror movies. And you got so many amazing directors adapting his films, Stanley Kubrick, David Cronenberg, John Carpenter, Rob Reiner. It's a long list. It's a long list.
On and on. Yeah.
But what I wanted to call out was Creepshow and Creepshow 2. To me, those movies are like they kind of are in the trash bin where like the kind of culture of horror and Stephen King thrived in the 70s and 80s. Like King himself is a huge fan of trashy horror films, and Creepshow like are those trashy horror films. A few of them are based on his short stories. Some of them he wrote for the movie. He stars in one of the segments in the first
That's
one.
the only thing I really remember. I'll never forget Stephen King touching that. What was it? The meteor?
Yeah, he plays kind of a dumpski who finds a meteor in his backyard and is like stupid enough to touch it, and he becomes infected. Also topical today. But the sort of like, and it was like the precursor to Tales from the Crypt and like Tales from the Dark Side type stuff. It was this comic book themed horror anthology concept, but super like dime store trashy. And I think that like that Creepshow really sums that up without being kind of bogged down by the things that make some of those other movies great, which is the mark of the filmmakers who made them. Creepshow really just feels like it's kind of unbridled Stephen King to me.
Got it. Greg, on to you.
Again, like you just said, for adaptations, it also depends on the filmmaker involved with this. So, like my personal favorites is going to be something like a Christine or even Maximum Overdrive.
Maximum Overdrive. Oh my god.
Again, that's more on the Stephen King's. He loves this kind of work, like in trashy.
Yes,
So
yes.
Maximum Overdrive is just pure King. Honestly, he even directed it.
He directed it,
So-
right? It's
What a
him
film.
getting to do the exact thing. Yeah.
I want Emilio Estevez and a bunch of trucks just attacking a small town. Okay, cool, perfect.
Sure.
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
But then now easing into like best adaptations, if you want to go critical response, and that's when you're looking at stuff like Misery, which is amazing. I think the Misery is probably one of the.
Kathy Bates in that movie, guys.
Is it perfect? Would you say that's a perfect Stephen King adaptation from book to screen? I think so.
That
I really think that's honestly the most accurate.
Of any of them, I think that's
Dead Zone comes in close. Cronenberg's Dead Zone is like one of my all-time favorite Cronenberg films.
that's so thoroughly Cronenberg as well.
Exactly. So you can go
Who
on
I'm
forever.
a giant fan of. But yeah,
Ryan Peterson.
I'm gonna be lame here and say, like I said, I don't like
lame.
the supernatural as much.
now Ryan liked a certain Stephen King movie.
So, like, yeah,
It's the mouse. Let me-
Shawshank. No, not the Green Mile.
Okay.
Not the Green Mile. Not the Green Mile. But Shawshank Redemption is up there for me in terms of like the drama that the story that it told, and the friendship between these two guys in prison and other thing. But Misery holds a special place in my heart. My dad actually worked on Misery.
Oh, wow.
During doing props for that movie, and so it was always, we would watch that all the time, like growing up.
Oh my gosh.
When it came out,
Is that weird as a
Dad
child?
has the log.
he would put on the Laserdisc or the VHS, whatever we had back then, and he would we just tell stories about making it and about how great Kathy Bates was, and it's so great to work with.
Please
and,
regale us with the story.
I wish I had something specific, but he says that she's like the sweetest person in the world. And then you watch that movie and you're like,
how is
oh
this
my
possible?
God. But I enjoyed those smaller scale stories of drama and horror when there's no supernatural element, and it's just like you get in a car accident and you wake up and you're in this home and she's forcing you to write a book, and she's literally gone off the deep end, and just, you know, the scene where she smashes his feet, you know, it's complete horror when you're a young kid watching that. So
You don't have to be a kid.
yeah, no, it's all
It's
horror.
okay.
It's all horror.
Yeah.
I haven't rewatched it in a
It's
while.
terrifying,
I need to go back and rewatch it because I just have really fond memories. It sounds bad to have fond
Such
memories of that,
fond memories.
but like of watching it and being like, oh, my dad worked on this. Like this is cool, and like, you know, just, and then the horror of being put in that situation. You can, I guess maybe I connect more with, like, I can see myself in that situation and
Protagonist
freaking
trapped
out.
in hell
Right.
scenarios are a big thing with Stephen King. You can
Yeah.
read, I would suggest Gerald's Game.
Yes.
Gerald's Game is
Cujo,
good,
even
yeah.
Cujo has that. You're trapped in hell. They're stuck. When she was stuck in the car and with the dog, and her child dies.
Right.
But even from there, God, what else you can do? Secret Window. Oh man, was it the John Cusack film? With 13? Is it 1308?
Then the Motel.
No, what is
1408?
1408? Yes,
yeah.
same thing.
So close.
Protagonist is trapped in hell, and there's nothing they can do.
Yeah,
And
it feels like a
Needful
realistic
Things is
horror.
about an entire
you know?
town that's been trapped in hell.
Yeah, but they got their big
Their own
baddie. They
personal
had
hell.
they brought in a big baddie
Oh, yes,
for that.
yes.
For Needful Things, you still had the spooky. Whoa, here I come.
At least for the movie adaptation, R.I.P. Max von Sydow.
Oh yes.
Oh.
Oh.
Ryan Peterson, did your dad keep any props for Misery?
Oh man, I do not know for sure.
The log.
I know
Block.
we had the typewriter
Really?
that they were using for the film. Maybe the block that was in between his legs. I don't know. I mean, he's kind of gotten rid of a lot of the stuff that he had in terms of what we used to kind of, well, play around the house with and play cops and robbers with and all that kind of stuff.
So what props did you play cops and robbers with? From what movies?
He also worked on one of the greatest movies ever called Point Break with Keanu Reeves
Yes.
and Gary Busey.
You mean Fast and the Furious, right? That's.
He did not make Fast and Furious. No,
I
sorry.
thought that was the same thing.
No. Point Break, the original Point Break. Yeah, much better than those Fast and the Furious movies, which I haven't seen either.
Oh, right. I forgot.
It's
yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
Everyone
Seriously,
forgets that.
it literally is the same thing. Yeah. So he had all the fake ex-president masks. He had all like the FBI badges. He had every
dope.
gun in the movie. My brother would dress up in that. He had some he also worked on Jurassic Park.
That's so cool.
A Few Good Men, random stuff. So we got to go on set to some of these things. Some of them were a little bit like quiet. Like we couldn't go to Jurassic Park. It was very closed set, like no family. Also got stuck in the hurricane in Kauai when he was there working on it. So
wow.
that was pretty nuts. But got to go to like Point Break set, Few Good Men, meet Tom Cruise, that kind of stuff. Pretty fun. Fun things.
You met Tom Cruise?
Yeah. This is
What
a
was
long
that
time
like?
ago. This is
It's like a handshake.
yeah, like a
Hey,
handshake, and
I
here's a
got
softball during the hot softball scene.
Got
Signs a softball for us, hands it to
Nice.
my brother and I. Nice to meet you guys. Met Kevin Bacon. Just
How have I not known any?
small
of these
flex. Sorry, guys. Yeah, just
So now
not that big
we're
of a deal.
all 2 hops away from Kevin Bacon.
yes. You
Yeah,
all,
there we
yeah,
are.
That's
yeah.
great.
6 degrees Kevin Bacon. Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys
6
have all.
degrees of Kevin Bacon.
We're all within it. Yeah.
All right, so that's it for this episode of You Should Be Watching, but please let us know in the comments or reach out to us via email if you want any recommendations for any TV, movie genres. We got it for you. It's ysbw@gamespot.com. That's ysbw@gamespot.com. And let's plug our Twitters so you can reach out to us individually. I'm at Chastity_V. Schubert.
I am Anvil1, O-N-E.
I'm at Greg Spot Thomas. That's it.
Yep.
I am at Ryan Eric P.
And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Later, guys.
Later.